everyone, and welcome to this week's Squiggly Career Podcast. I think it is episode 52.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that I'm Helen. Is that right?
It is.
And I know that I'm Helen Tuffer, one of the co-founders, and I'm here with Sarah Ellis, the other co-founder.
Hi, everyone.
So this week then, thank you for being with us. If it's your first time, actually, before I talk about the topic, if it's your first time, we should say hello to you and thank you for listening. We are the founders of a business called Amazing If, and we talk an awful lot about squiggly careers. And that's based on the idea, really, that careers are changing. They're not this kind of linear, predictable thing anymore where we can do these career plans that have those 1, 2, 3 year targets in them, because actually quite a lot of the jobs that we're going to do in the future don't even exist yet, and our careers are going to be a lot more squiggly, and the skills that you need to succeed in a squiggly career look a bit different. And that's what Sarah and I do with Amazing If. We help people to develop the skills to succeed in a squiggly career.
Do you know what? On that, this week, I was looking at something that I'm judging and actually got rid of the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Well done.
Because I think that is just like the anti-squiggly career question. It's like expecting somebody now in this context to go, oh yeah, well in 5 years' time, this is what I plan to be doing. And feeling that is actually a good thing to ask somebody, I feel is actually really outdated. I think it's okay to ask people about their aspirations and how they want to be spending their time. Yeah. But to go, what's your 5 year plan? I'm just like, no, let's just kill that.
Yeah,
I was proud of that moment.
Yeah, we should almost do the how would you answer that question? Because I bet people still get answered that, and you kind of want to answer it in a way that is sort of makes people think differently about careers. But
rather than just getting really defensive, like, not even relevant anymore.
Maybe we'll answer that. Maybe I'll do that in an Instagram story one morning.
Good idea.
So this weekly podcast is all about us trying to break down some of those skills, inspire you a little bit, get you thinking a bit differently about careers, and just helping you on a weekly basis. And this week, we are going to be talking about inspiring leaders, talking about some of the leaders that we have inspired us, both people that we have known directly and hopefully worked for, and also some of the ones that we maybe haven't worked for but have still looked to for inspiration. But I think most significantly, what we want to do is to really summarise some of the common traits about all of those leaders that actually we can all look at in our everyday jobs, and some of those traits that we can embody every day, because leadership is not just about a job title. Actually, in a squiggly career, leadership becomes about something that we can all do every day.
Yeah, I think actually I've been thinking a lot about leadership and how it's changing because of the squiggly careers that we're all experiencing. And actually I think almost leaders now have in lots of ways a harder job, because there's more factors to consider. So things like, we're likely to not all physically be in the same place all of the time now. So remote leadership is kind of really interesting, whether that's remote leadership a bit of the time, all of the time. Hierarchy is changing. And so the idea that it's okay because you've got a leader who basically did the whole tell style. People don't respond brilliantly to that, but that's what, those kind of hierarchical structures were set up to do. That's how kind of decisions were made. And so now if you're working in project teams more often, the leader of that team might change really frequently. You might not have one leader the whole time. So this idea of, leaders being this like one godlike figure almost in a team or an organisation, I think that is disappearing. And one of the things I think is really important to appreciate about leaders and leadership generally is that there is no blueprint. And I think when we think about this, that does make sense, but there's no leader that is perfect. I think that's worth stating, because sometimes I think they kind of have this aura of, oh wow, they're in an amazing job and so they must be brilliant at everything. That's definitely not, in my experience, definitely not true. And I've worked for some brilliant leaders, but everyone's good at some things and not so good at others. And there isn't this kind of approach where you go, this is the leadership approach. As long as I tick all these boxes, that's it, I'll be a great leader. I think now you've got to decide for yourself, what does leadership mean to you? And then what actions are you going to take?
And there's a really good article that I will link to on this as well about, I was looking at definitions of leadership, and Sarah and I have both done MBAs. I know. I was thinking we've both done MBAs. We've both done courses on what's the difference between management and leadership. But unfortunately, I didn't find that information. I just went online. But if I look at some of the definitions, a really good Inc.com article with 100 definitions of leadership. It says things like leadership is getting people to work for you when they're not obligated. That's from Fred Smith. sounds like an entirely made up person. Sorry, Fred Smith. But one of the tests of leadership is the ability to recognise a problem before it becomes an emergency. Arnold Glasgow. Leadership is the art of influencing others to their maximum performance to accomplish any task, objective or project, from somebody Cohen. But I guess reading them all, like I'll flick through the majority of these 100 tips, and none of them really say leadership is having a title and a place in the hierarchy of an organisation. Like, it's all behavioural and traits, which makes me think that actually anybody can be a leader. Like, you don't need to have it as part of your job title. There are so many things that we can do every day to lead people towards an outcome, to bring people together, to create a vision, all that kind of stuff. That's basically the summary of these 100 definitions. And I find that really empowering, because I think actually anybody can be a leader, and that if you have the desire, I suppose, and maybe the passion for the thing that you want to lead, there's nothing stopping you from being the leader of that thing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as we start to do lots of different types of roles, whether it's freelancing, running our own business, leading project teams. I think leadership previously has been also quite associated with like the number of people in your team. You know, you often get asked that question. I still get asked that question quite a lot. You know, oh, like how many people are actually in your team? And, you know, you get quite a different reaction to if you're leading one person to if you're leading 40 or 50. Now, they're quite different, you know, potentially quite different roles or quite different styles of leadership. But I think, you know, moving away from equating leadership with is about a number of people or about a job title to it's actually about how you choose to act day in, day out is much more useful and actually relevant for where careers are going.
You've totally given me my inspiration for this week's article that I've got to write. I write a monthly article for Marketing Week, everybody, and I have to write it this week. And insofar in this podcast, I've just been thinking about the like outdated questions that we get asked in our career. And I've been thinking, you know, you were saying about like, where are you in 5 years? And also like, how many people do you manage? Like, why is that a sign of status? So yes, we will get back to the topic of leadership, but thank you for inspiring the this week's Marketing Week article, which I will write in the next day or so.
I want a credit somewhere in there.
you always you get much credit. So shall we have a bit of a share? We haven't shared with each other, everybody, but about some of the leaders that have inspired us and maybe why specifically we found it inspiring.
Yeah, and I think when I almost to your point there about when people ask you these kind of questions, your thoughts sometimes immediately go to the people that you've worked for, because you think, oh, you know, who's inspired me that I've worked for, because they're the leaders. And actually, the more I've thought about this over the last couple of days, it's actually some of the leaders that I've worked with as peers that have probably inspired me the most in terms of my own like leadership development, because they were some people who, you know, I was working with day in, day out. They were different to me, but I really admired their style. I think I was learning a lot from them. And particularly when I was at Sainsbury's in my final role, there was kind of a few of us, a girl called Rachel Eyre, Sarah Kilmartin, Rob George, myself. We knew each other pretty well, and we kind of all came together in this leadership team. And often I think you do look back at certain points in your career and think they are kind of really, you know, like high, like learning moments, because you're probably in the role that's kind of well suited to you and you're getting a lot from that. But the people around you are also absolutely brilliant. And so from each of those, they're all very different leaders to me and very different people to me. But I think we all sort of held ourselves to account and we had very clear kind of shared objectives. And I just think I learned a lot, almost like daily, from just being part of a leadership team with leaders of that calibre and quality.
And it was kind of your peers as well as kind of, you know, more formally someone that you work for.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like, I would work for every one of those people, you know, and I've worked with them, and they're people that kind of their things that I've learned from working with them has definitely stayed with me. And actually, even if I'd ever got a challenge or a problem, I knew that if I went to them, that they could help me solve it that bit better than I could by myself. And so I think what really inspired me about that scenario was this sense of collective leadership. It wasn't just about me as a leader, it was about what we could achieve together. And that was really motivating.
I think that's brilliant when you have that collective leadership. I feel like that's when a team is like at its most powerful, where it's not that hierarchy is not present and it's actually what everyone can bring and everyone's taking ownership as well. I think that's a big part of leadership. Mine is going to feel like a real name drop, and I didn't work for Richard Branson directly, so it's not. But one thing that I really noticed that I thought was particularly impressive when I was at Virgin, so I worked at their head office of Virgin, which is like the bit that Richard Branson owns, and then they have sort of like legal relationships with all the other Virgin branded companies. But the one thing I really noticed there was this is going to sound really silly, but the amount of smart people that Richard Branson employed to directly work for him. And why I find that quite interesting is there's an often like shared comment about that actually you should, what's that saying, Sarah, about you should hire people smarter than you.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what Richard Branson's IQ is, so I don't know if they were smarter than him, but they are very, very smart people, and you would have to be a very confident individual not to have been threatened by the intelligence. I mean, there's a guy called Josh Bayliss, who's a CEO, who is just such a smart guy. I have no idea how he retains so much information about the Virgin companies. There are all the people on the investment team, like Virgin at the centre is full of such smart people, and it just really made me think about how, you know, great leaders aren't great alone. Great leaders of great companies are often able to do that because they've hired really, really smart people, and they've taken a step back from their ego in order to do that.
And almost what that is, what you're just describing actually, is very high levels, I think, of self-awareness. I think leaders that have been really brilliant and inspirational, they know they're not perfect because they appreciate that's not a kind of desired state. Mm-hmm. And so actually what they understand is, okay, well, how do I make sure that I get people around me who are complementary, who are additive, and that the whole will be bigger than the sum of the parts. And like you say, their ego is not, put under pressure by that. There's no concern that, they're going to make me look bad or anything like that. It's just, I want to be the best I can be, but I also want the people around me to make us all even better.
I have another one as well, which is one that it will be a shared one for you. I don't know if you've written it down, but I thought of another great leader that I haven't worked for, but I think is really inspiring because of what she has created through leading, is Sherilyn Shackle.
Yeah, I'd okay that.
And so Sherilyn created something called the Marketing Academy, which is something that Sarah and I have both been part of. Sarah's also on the board of the Marketing Academy, and it's something that we both continue to support in lots of different ways. And Sherilyn created that, I don't know, what do you reckon, Sarah? How many years ago? 10 years ago? 9 years ago?
Yeah, something like that, from scratch.
Yeah. So from scratch. And it is, I mean, look it up. If you are in the marketing industry, look it up because it's now global. It's like in Australia. I think it's in New York. It's going to be like in other countries. It's an amazing initiative. And it basically gives free career development and training to a group of people in each of these countries every single year. You get mentoring, coaching, you get to be inspired by some amazing speakers. And Sherilyn created this. I mean, it wasn't her job. She set it up. She used all of her network and knowledge and contacts to do that, and she has created something amazing. But what I think for me, from a leadership perspective, she had a vision, she brought people together to achieve that vision, but she's also it's never been like ego driven. Like Sarah, she's almost like a reluctant front woman for it, I think, sometimes, because she's so much about the people that are benefiting from the program. And I find that from a leadership perspective really empowering to see these people that are leading amazing initiatives, creating great things, and actually for them it's much more about the opportunities they're creating for other people, businesses, individuals, and that's the success, not their aura or their place on a pedestal.
Yeah, I think what Sherilyn did for me personally was show me the art of the possible. I genuinely don't think probably Amazing If would be into where it is today if it hadn't been for her, because actually what she facilitated, I think she's a leader that facilitates, is she gave me opportunities with people or to think in different ways that just expanded my horizons, and then importantly gave me the confidence to believe I could do it. And so suddenly I went from, thinking, I'm sort of happily ticking along in my job, working in a bank at the time, to thinking, oh, wow, well, maybe I could be a chief executive at some point, or maybe I could, scale the heights of whatever thing I was aiming to end up doing, or maybe I can create my own thing. Yeah, I'd like to be honest, I didn't really scale loads of heights. I just sort of started doing some training and development, which became Amazing If.
What an amazing leadership trait, though, that is, to expand someone's horizons and show them the art of the possible. Like, if that's how you go about your everyday, like, wow, like
having a pretty big impact.
That'd be a pretty big impact doing that every day. I think that's quite an inspiring thing to set for yourself to try and do. And again, that could be for an apprentice that works for you. It could be for a colleague you've worked with for ages. Think about how you can expand their horizons and show them the art of the possible. I might write that down after tonight.
So shall we do, we've come up with kind of 5 traits that we think we've consistently seen in lots of the leaders that have inspired us both, but also things that we think everyone could do pretty much from tomorrow after you're listening to this podcast. So they're things that we think everyone could kind of take action in your own jobs, kind of in your own way and in your own style.
Yes. Okay. So maybe I'll start with the first one then. So the first trait that we have consistently seen in people is bravery. So making tough decisions. And that toughness can apply to, it's a tough financial decision. It has an impact on other people, but just having the ability to, stand up and make those decisions when other people might not, I think is a big sign. And I was thinking about an example of this. Sarah, I think you might know this person. This is obviously Sarah and I's great prep. But do you know Daniel Murray?
He does a Secret Leaders podcast that I'm always recommending.
That's what I thought.
I've met him briefly, and he's just super entrepreneurial, full of ideas. Really, he is really brave, actually.
Well, the reason I specifically think he is brave is because my understanding is I followed on LinkedIn, and he founded a business called Grabble.
Yeah.
And also Mobula, I may be saying that right or not. But recently he folded the business, and he has written the most eloquent and brave LinkedIn post on this. Like, if you want an amazing example of a leader being brave, Daniel Murray's LinkedIn post on why they had to close Grabble down, which was a successful business, but not successful enough for what they were trying to do and the people that they basically had to pay every month. And it is heartfelt, it is honest, it is about respecting the money, it's about decisions that, maybe they didn't make as well, and it's kind of inspiring. It's a growth mindset in action, but bravery at the core. I highly recommend, if you want a great example, as I will link to. He'll be like, why am I getting all these people reading this post? But I will link to it in the post that we do on the website about this, because it's just a really great example of someone making a tough decision.
Yeah, I would agree. My second one is being selfless. So this is something I associate with all of the best people I've worked with who are leading in any capacity. They put other people and almost team achievements, company achievements before their own. So I think actually one of the most frustrating things as somebody early in your career, or actually at any point in your career, is when, someone else takes credit for your work. I've read a lot of feedback from people saying, they find that really difficult. But I think people who are brilliant leaders, it's not about them, and it's not about their, progressing because of their own kind of status. They've sort of understood that the way that they will succeed is by other people succeeding, which is starting to get into followership. And I think sometimes leadership is often defined as, your kind of definition of leaders can be how many other leaders you create to yourself. And that's something I always have in mind when I think about my own leadership, is thinking you almost want all the people you work with, you want all of them to be really, really successful and to reach their potential, exceed their potential. And if that happens, then I always feel like I've done the best job possible.
Yeah, I agree. And I've got a great example of that, actually, which is the Hawksby Collective. So the Hawksby Collective is a global network of freelancers, which has been set up by Alex Hurst and Lizzie Penny. And it's a network that I am part of, and I'm really proud to be part of. And Alex and Lizzie set the business up because they wanted to create a world of work without bias. So if you're part of the Hawksby Collective, you define your work style, so like how you want to work, when you want to work, and you can join projects on that basis, so that you can, if you want to do 3 other jobs, you can do. If you want to fit your family around work, you can do. It enables you to work in a way that works for you. So super inspiring. But on the point of leadership and also selflessness, they are not about we're creating this and we want to be, we want to be seen to be successful because of this. It's really non-hierarchical, and they have directors of each of the business units that can build those business units up. They have a financial structure which enables you to benefit from the success of a business unit. It's not all about it going back to the founders. They reinvest a lot of the profits that get made in the business. They're fully transparent about the profits. I mean, it is a really inspiring, selfless business model with a real clear vision. And I think they are just a great example of an organisation that is growing and thriving on those principles.
Brilliant. So number 3 is being calm under pressure. And I think this is relevant to everybody every day, because we all have sometimes expected or sometimes unexpected things happen to us where we need to very quickly be able to kind of take a step back, have some perspective, and kind of understand kind of what the right thing to do is. And when you sort of see this in action, it's incredible. And I spent a couple of years working in corporate affairs, and people generally who work in corporate affairs are very good at this because they're used to dealing with reactive and sometimes really significant reputational challenges. And I worked with a brilliant leader called Yvette Edwards, who works at Unilever now. And Yvette is just kind of the consummate professional when it comes to things going wrong. And when you just like wanted her by your side, those like go-to people. And like even now I'm thinking, actually, if I was really panicking about something, or there was something kind of reputational where I wanted that expertise, that calmness, and she just had this sort of presence and gravitas that she kind of took with her. And some of the things that she was dealing with were, really tricky, and no prior warning, and you're trying to understand a lot, often areas that you're not an expert on in a very short space of time. And actually, she didn't have the easiest kind of work balance anyway. She had to work part-time, and so she was trying to manage all those kind of things. And just watching her always stay calm, you could see that it reassured, it almost like flowed out to everybody else. You could see almost like that she was there and everyone was going, okay, this is going to be okay, she's got this under control. And I mean, that's almost a kind of more extreme example of somebody where that's kind of core to what they do for a living. But I would say I've seen that again and again in leaders who, the shadow that you cast as a leader.
Yeah, totally.
Is so important. And I think the best leaders understand how they're feeling can be understood and felt by everybody else. And actually they make a real effort to kind of manage that proactively.
I remember when I was at BP and I had this moment of realisation. So the office that I was in was a lovely place called Pangbourne. And I remember this one particular day, and I was running around from like building to building, and I had in my hand, I had my laptop, papers, my phone, and I was like juggling and running around everywhere, like just feeling like really like ridiculously rushed and pressured. And I don't know what made me think of it, but I remember thinking about one of the senior guys that headed up this business area that I worked in, and I was like thinking to myself, he never rushes around like this.
Yeah.
Like, he's like 2 levels above me, and I never see John rushing around like this. Like, I think I've got this wrong. And it really made me think. I mean,
it's the swan analogy, isn't it? Have you heard that? Someone said this to me, actually. Yeah. It's the if you are certainly leading kind of teams or projects or people, even if it's just 2 of you, actually having almost that swan-like demeanour is actually quite important. It doesn't mean you can't be vulnerable. It doesn't mean you don't understand the pressures. But if you're looking really frantic, how do you think everyone else is going to feel?
Yeah, so and I really feel like that's something that everybody, to the point of this podcast being about like leadership traits we can all embody, that like staying calm, having perspective, not just being aware of if you're rushing around and you're frantic, that has a ripple effect on other people. Actually, is it not better to have a ripple effect of calmness and perspective? Like we can all do that. I can definitely do that more than I don't think I
get that right all the time.
No, I agree, me too.
So number 4 is judgment. And I guess that's probably a little bit linked to the previous one around you can only have good judgment if you are calm under pressure. But I think the ability, and actually this is probably particularly relevant as work becomes more squiggly and there are more kind of factors involved in work, the ability to absorb different information, different perspectives, and then be able to almost like make considered and thoughtful judgments about kind of what the right action is. So, it's really easy. Actually, somebody, Daryl Fielding, who's a brilliant lady, ex-CMO of Vodafone and done lots of very senior kind of jobs, she was talking about how often people are very good at like almost like diagnosing the problem, but not very good at like taking action. So, like it's really easy to all talk about like, oh, this is not very good, that's not very good, I'm not very happy with this. Actually, the leaders who are kind of make the most impact are the ones that go, okay, so we've understood that that's the challenge or the issue or the problem. Let's think about what that solution might look like. And it's a typical thing. It's like a bit of a cliche, you know, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. But I can see a difference in terms of the brilliant leaders that I've spent time with. And I had one lady I worked for, a lady called Sarah Warby, who was particularly good at this, is she would take the time to understand. She'd really listen, which I think is probably another trait that we can all, you know, work on. Listen to other points of view, but she would know that moment where she had to step in and go, okay, right, this is what we need to do to move forward, so that actually you don't come out of a meeting or out of a project going, we're not actually really sure what happens next, or actually have we just spent a lot of time diagnosing the problem.
Okay, then. So the last one that we've got as a trait that we think we've seen in leaders, but we also think that actually everyone can kind of work with, is about caring. And I know that sounds really like superficial, like just going, I care. But this really struck home to me recently at Microsoft when I was having a conversation with someone on my team who was going through, it was actually a late night sort of instant message conversation. And they were going through some different personal stuff. And I was just, you know, I said, like, please know that I care. I just want you to be okay and that I care and that, you know, I'm here if you need me. And they said, oh, like, basically no manager had ever expressed it like that before. And it really made me think, like, what are we doing if we don't care? What are we, surely, yes, we work. Yes, we want to do well. Yes, we want to make everything successful. But shouldn't we just, like, care about how people are feeling and whether they're doing their best work? And I just feel that actually asking people, like, I think we've talked about this before, about asking people, you know, how are you doing today? And just taking the time out, not to just do that flippant, you okay, while the lift is closing, and just expressing some genuine interest in how people are and the work that they're doing and, you know, what their successes are, and having questions that allow us to show that genuine interest in people is just super important, and we should all be doing it.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that whole people are at their best when they bring their whole selves to work. And often I think people bring their whole selves to work when you feel confident that the leaders that you're working with care about you as an individual rather than just the outputs.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense in terms of the difference. So if you feel like actually someone only cares about have you done your presentation on time, but actually hasn't taken the time to understand what other work you might be doing or what other priorities you might have, what else you do outside of work and all those kind of things, and actually being genuinely interested, and like you say, not just asking because you sort of think you should. Now, I'm not saying, you know, you should spend all of your time doing this, because obviously we all have work to go on and do, but I think you can spot the difference in the leaders who you can see there's an extra level of attention to the individual than perhaps, you know, you can see elsewhere. And it's those people who, again, I think they know when they need to make the time. Like the best, actually, that's a good way of thinking about it. The best leaders I've worked for, I've always known they've been there for me when I've needed them, always. And I knew that, and often I didn't need them. You know, like you were getting on and you were doing what you were doing, and that was fine. But every single one of them, it would have been old school text or WhatsApp them or whatever it would have been, and said, oh, I just really need to chat to you for half an hour, 15 minutes. I know that they would have spotted and gone, and they would have cared enough to be like, I'll definitely make time for that. It's actually something I really hold myself to account for as well, of going, of course we're all busy, but I would really hope that if anyone said to me, I really need to speak to you like tomorrow, that I would make that work.
So I think definitely that's something for people to just reflect on, is to what extent are you sharing care to your colleagues as well? And how do you make that time for other people? Like, it doesn't just have to be the leader who's doing it, particularly in team meeting situations. Because I think sometimes when we think of leaders being, you know, senior people as like a conventional framing of it, they can often be quite busy. But actually, I think this care point is a really easy way to put some kind of leadership into a team, because you can be that person who is creating that culture within the team of care.
Yeah, and actually, do you know what? I had some feedback on this last week where someone didn't tell me something at the time and told me 2 weeks later when we were catching up. And I said, oh, I'm almost like disappointed that you didn't tell me this at the time. I really would have wanted to know that. And she was like, oh no, but I appreciate you're always really busy. And I was like, yes, but never too busy for this. So making sure that you've got to be transparent that this is important to you and explicit. You can't expect people to know that you just care. And that was a really good example for me of, even with that person, I would have thought they would know that kind of what was happening in their life generally and at work would really matter to me. But even then they'd gone, oh no, she's probably a bit busy, she's got a lot on. And, you know, so I think just making sure that you are transparent about that.
So shall I just summarise the 5 traits then that we have seen and think that actually we can all do this every day in our jobs? So the first one then is bravery, those tough decisions, standing up for what you believe in. The second thing is about selflessness, putting others before yourself, not caring about who gets the credit. The third thing is about being calm under pressure, being the person that gives perspective to a conversation. The fourth is about judgment. So that is kind of making a considered point of view, gathering lots of different information, conversations, but being objective about your perspective. And the fifth one is about care. So just caring about the people that you work with, making time for those conversations, and maybe creating that culture of care within a team environment as well. So that's it for this week then. Hopefully that is helpful. We'd love to know if you've got any leaders that have inspired you, and maybe specifically what it is about how they've led that has inspired you. And you can let us know on all the normal places. So get in touch with us at amazingif.com, or send us a message on Instagram where we're at amazingif, or on Twitter at amazing_if. We're in all those places. We'd love to hear from you. As ever as well, if you've got any feedback for us or suggestions for future podcasts, you are welcome to share those with us there. And next week, Sarah, what is our plan?
So next week we're going to talk about how you can use your strengths more at work. So I think we all recognise that strengths are kind of the way forward, or hopefully people are starting to recognise that strengths are the way forward in terms of adding the most value to your organisation and also doing the stuff that you enjoy and are most engaged in. But actually thinking about practically what does this mean day in, day out in terms of how do you bring those strengths to life? How do you seek out all of the right opportunities to use your strengths?
Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. We'll be back with you with strengths next week, and we'll speak to you soon, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.